And so it's that umbrella again. And had we not had policies, that would be a different story.
Well, and to that, did anybody else want to say something? I don't want to cut anybody off. Mary, Heather, you can
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, the other thing that for me that I underlined was the last point, serving our constituents.
Yes.
That our constituency is a broad constituency, and I think still something that our constituency is understanding as a broad constituency. So, and I guess I, again, kind of look at serve our constituency as all of those things with budget, with policy, with communication and engagement, and with decision making, and being transparent in all those processes. That is part of, those are the elements of serving your constituency. And I think, to me, the most important thing that jumps out is serving our collective constituency, and especially not the squeaky wheel, because we have squeaky wheels in our constituency, and it is very tempting to be drawn in those directions. So.
The policy part of it, we have a lot of policies, okay, and a lot of them are quite old. I know they get renewed and looked at periodically. If Brian was here, you know what he would say, because he wants every policy every year to be evaluated as to whether the policy is effective, working, and whatever. That's wonderful, except there's only so many hours in the day to do that. And so the practical parts of that get a little heavy. But I think for all of us, I think policy is something that all of us have to constantly be aware of. And I'm certainly not touting myself as having any idea of what some of them say, because I don't read them all the time. But for both new and old members, I think if we're going to play the policy and adopt them, adopting them is one thing. It's how they play out, how we use them, how we hold the superintendent responsible for implementing them, and how the superintendent then can go back to us and say, this is not very practical. Well, you've already said you need a policy to determine how we do certain things, and that's going to be more helpful for you when you do it. So that to me is a really key part of this. Some boards have this policy governance where their whole meetings are real. We've rejected that a number of times when it's presented to us. I'm not sure that's any better than anything else. I'm not convinced it is. However, the policy seems to be, we need to be a little bit more attuned as individual members to sort of this back and forth between superintendent and us and individuals. So I'm not saying that would be, I'm not saying I do that. I'm just saying, as I think about it, I think it's important to do that.
Well, one of the things you heard me say at the beginning of tonight's meeting is that while this first part has been looking at phase 5, but that I think you'll see it all is interwoven into getting us to superintendent evaluation. One of the things we're going to look at shortly is our board policies that you have that speak to superintendent evaluation. They're very general and very broad. And when we start looking later tonight at the topic of superintendent evaluation, that's very, very detailed. And so this is meant to be very broad, but kind of giving you the highlights of what the board roles are and what the superintendent roles are. If you go and take out your governance core books, it will give you much more detail about board roles and superintendent roles. I'm going to be working with the Hannaford board on Thursday, and that topic is specifically the roles of boards, the roles of superintendent. And for the time that I'm with them, that is all we're talking about. And that's not really what the focus primarily is here with you all tonight. And so I'm not trying to sidestep the concerns at all, but this is meant to be that 50,000 foot view, or whatever you want to call it, of the general roles of the board and the superintendent. I mean, I could really minimize it and say the board's job is to establish policy and to govern. The superintendent's role is to be in charge of administrating the district and supervising all staff. Obviously, Dr. Baker is a very busy woman. She cannot be running every school and doing every job, and that's why she has very talented leaders to help her with that. And she can't teach every single class in the district, and that's why she has very talented educators to do that. But theoretically, her job is to run the district, your job is to govern the district. And so these items that are bulleted here are meant to be the basic roles of you as the board. And so that there are some things left out, I'm not surprised. I'm not trying to minimize it, but that's the general focus of why Mac and Jake has these things listed as the roles. Barb.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway for me is that we're a team. You know,
Yes.
It's like we have our role and our superintendent has her role, and we have to mesh those, right? In our
Yes.
own lane, obviously, but it's a team, right? And if one part of the team isn't pulling its weight, it's going to affect the other part of the team. So,
Dr. Baker, comments that you want to add to this discussion?
I think, one of the things that is really important as we move forward is the third of the expectations by the superintendent of the board. I like the idea that I get to have expectations of the board. That seems, that's a nice concept. The third one speaks to the idea that it's important that you embrace the concept of operating as a team. And I can't underscore that enough, that together, as board members, you do that, even when you bring different perspectives to something and you work that out and you come together, because if you do, it has a positive ripple effect on every other part of the organization. Everyone follows your lead. And I think that's important. I also think that one of the things that I really appreciated, and one of the things actually that drew me to accept the position is number one and number two. I mean, you're an engaged board, as I've seen you. I feel like if I come to you with information, you're interested in that information. You want to know that information, and you're a group that will read materials ahead of time and ask questions and is deeply interested in those things. And so that is wonderful to work with. It truly is. That feels very supportive. Sometimes it's difficult. You're coming after a day of work, or right, or whatever you've done in your life, and to come here and then focus in on sometimes highly detailed information, at your 11th hour. That's not always easy. So not take it for granted, but it's really appreciated in that sense. So, and I have since I've been here, I've felt like there's a very productive dialogue between operations and governance. Okay, this is how Barb and I did it the other day. Like, all right, here's where we are. Oh, I think this part's operations. This part relates, to board work, and that seems to flow very, very naturally and come up in conversation, so that we're able to move together through things well. So I appreciate the list. It's nice to reflect on the information.
How many of you are parents? Just raise your hand if you're a parent. Okay. I'm guessing because I've gotten to work with you all before and you're such good people, but when I was a kid, which was, I'm learning, a long time ago, I used to brag I was the youngest, and now I've discovered I'm in that old group. But if I went to my mom and asked for something, and she said no, and then I went to Daddy, and he said no, it's like, that didn't work. Because they stood aligned. You all must be a united team. All of you, the board as a unit and the superintendent. If there are disagreements, obviously there will be, but you must stand united as a team. All 14 of you. Did I get that right, Barb?
13.
13?
Yeah.
14.
That's
All 14 of you.
That's team math.
I know. Oh, no.
You must function as a team of 14.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you go out that door, you have to be linked arms as a team of 14. Yeah. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but, you know, it's kind of like those norms. It bears repeating. So, all right. We are doing great on time. So I'm going to move us along because we're kind of flowing into this switching our brains into the idea of superintendent evaluation. So I'm going to call a brief break in case anybody needs a bio break or whatever, and let's plan to resume at 6:45. Okay?
I appreciate it. I know what presentation. Yeah.
Do they have better chairs? They have cushions.
I have short
ahead of yourselves, that you have this. And you have a plan, you have a roadmap, you know where you're going. And you have goals that match it, belonging, access, and success. And so those goals become your roadmap for what you're going to do. I can't recite it to you, so nobody better quiz me on it, but I have read through your strategic plan. Now, I promise you, we're way ahead of schedule, well, not way ahead, but we are ahead of schedule, so I'm not gonna keep you to 8:30 just for, well, I won't say what I wanted to say, some blank and grins. So I'm not gonna keep you to 8:30 if we don't need to, but, and Barb and Wendy know this. When tomorrow, we really delve into superintendent evaluation. Superintendent evaluation should grow, superintendent goals should grow from board goals. Because you want your superintendent working on what the board says is important. So in a perfect world, we would be working on helping you as a board develop board goals. That would be, a day workshop where we build, and then we'd move into superintendent eval. We don't have that kind of time. So for this year, this school year, 24-25, we've agreed in our conversations, Wendy, Barb, and I, that because you've done so much work on developing district goals under belonging, success, and access, that for the superintendent for 24-25, she will develop her goals under those umbrellas and the district goals that you all have developed under your strategic plan. But for 25-26, you as a board need to develop board goals under your strategic plan, which, if I remember correctly, is like a 5-year plan, goes to 2029. So each year, you as a board need to develop goals that flow from the district goals into board goals, into the superintendent's goals, which we're going to work on tomorrow. We're not going to delve into that today. What we're going to do is just review the the district goals. So I think that they're on your agenda, if memory serves me correctly. Are they?
Belonging, access, and success.
Yes.
Yes, we wrote them out. Okay. Oh, not the we. I hate when people are talking singular and then they use that plural pronoun, drives me nuts. What are we having for dinner tonight? That's when the waitress comes, or the server comes to the table and does this. Drives me nuts. So,
we're sitting at the table.
yes. So, take a minute and just read through the goals that you established as a board for the district under belonging, access, and success. I'm going to do the same thing, just to review. These are excellent goals. So why, if they're so excellent, which they are, why do we want the board, why should the board have separate goals? Starting, in a perfect world, you'd have them now, but why should the board have separate goal focus areas each year that you would develop probably in the beginning of spring, maybe March-ish or so.
I would think to identify the areas that we need to improve and then make sure we're focusing on those.
Okay,
To achieve
yes,
these goals.
correct.
And,
Steve?
and what the board needs to develop and mature might be different from what the school district needs. I mean, there are things that we do that are not what the school district needs to do. For example, we had a dearth of experience, and so that's something that the board needs to address, not the school district. We had conflict in the past over different agendas, which is something the board needs to address, not the district. So.
And then why does, and we'll get into this more tomorrow, but why do the superintendent's goals need to grow or branch down from the board's goals? Suzanne?
Because hopefully the board's goals not only are employing access and success, but they're looking out for all students, for all constituents. So in order to do that, the superintendent then has to write goals that support those. It's kind of like writing an IEP, so that those goals support the bigger goals, and then you have objectives and such that give you some guidelines to go by, and if you aren't making progress, then you might have to rewrite and readjust.
And this thing, I'm sorry, Mary,
No,
go ahead.
I mean, I guess I'm just echoing what Suzanne is saying and bringing it back to this sort of direction. Like, both need to have the same DNA to be able to get to the same course, I guess. So, because if they're detached, if they don't have the same DNA, one part of the team may go that direction and another part of the team may go that direction. And it all needs to be informed by this sort of, I keep wanting to say like the promised land.
Public
You know,
school
the
separation of church and
I
state.
know.
At
But
least
I mean,
that's what we
like
hope.
the vision and what, where we want our students and our student education to look like.
The ultimate goal.
Yes.
I guess I just needed some clarity because here it says district goals. So it's the board's goals for the district, not the board's goals for the board. Or are they the same?
It's a great point. So right now, and forgive me for using we, you all know that I've just become part of you until I'm not. So your district goals are goals for the district, which grew out of, sorry, it's upside down, the strategic plan. And these are the drivers that will take us through 2024-25. And probably beyond, because they're broad. They deal with those big ideas of belonging, success, and
Access.
access, sorry. Such an
Access.
important one. But they are so broad. And you guys were so smart, there's a better word than that. You were so smart in keeping them to 3. As board members, and as superintendent, how many times do you think about, oh my gosh, I have so many things going on. I need 5 gazillion hands to keep everything in the air. If you've ever felt that way, and I include administrators, raise your hand. Okay. The purpose of goal setting is to narrow it to the big ideas. So when Dr. Baker develops her goals, and we talk about those tomorrow, and she's already been thinking about those, because that's going to be a big part of what we look at tomorrow if you picked ahead at the agenda. What are her goals for the coming year? She's going to and has been thinking about how to build them under those big umbrella ideas, and specifically the goals that you have established as the district goals. Preferably, she would have established her goals under what the board goals are. So there are probably 25 goals that you could come up with as a board, similarly that Wendy could come up with. But we want to narrow them. And your district administrators and your building principals are being asked to develop their goals based on what the superintendent has established and based on the district goals. Yet another reason why, and I applaud Dr. Baker, that she has invited administrators to these sessions. There are I said there are very few boards that would establish norms by now, or norms at all. There are very few superintendents who would have said to their administrative team, I would love for you to come and hear what I'm going to be evaluated on. But through that open and transparent process, her team knows how she will be evaluated because they too are evaluated. Evaluation is part of how we grow. It's not a gotcha. It's ongoing, and it's how we grow and improve. Tomorrow, the last thing we'll do is I will give you a facilitator evaluation form. And I want to hear what you thought I did well and what I can improve on. And there's no place for you to write your name unless you choose to. I want your feedback. How can I improve if I don't get your feedback? So that's what evaluation should be. I say this frequently and I will repeat it again tomorrow. Evaluation should be a no surprises document. You don't wait until you present the evaluation to your superintendent to share a concern. It should be ongoing feedback, just as Wendy will be giving ongoing feedback as she works with her administrators. So that together, I told you already a couple times of things that I'm not real proud of. Like, okay, I came up strong as an analyst and a tax master. I really wish I was in some of the other sections. And I model, because I tell you right up front which areas where I think I have weakness. I told you from the beginning, I had to write everything down because that's me, and I still didn't remember to get all the things copied from the get-go. That's my style. I would rather put it out there myself. That's just me. We all have our weaknesses, and then maybe I can learn from you how to improve on my weaknesses. That's what your superintendent is trying to do by bringing her team in. And so those are things that, and I'm way off track because I ramble. See, there's another one. But that's why we want to write goals, because they branch down. Barb?
Yeah, so in the strategic plan, we have our 3 main goals, and we also have strategies and targets. And so, like, some clarification would be helpful for me. I would think, and it could be totally wrong, that we kind of use this framework and then look at it from the perspective, what is reasonable? What's the timeline? We're looking at less than a year of this. What are some things we might want to set as kind of goals, but they're kind of underneath this, under this framework, right? It's not everything. It's like the first year, maybe it's belonging, maybe it's something under there, some specifics that we'd like to see. Is that wrong? I mean,
C, for the superintendent to
Yeah.
address?
or for the district as a whole, because we have this document, and I want to make sure that we're moving forward in this document, right, that we've created. And we can't just do it all at once. And we need to what's the priority? What needs to be done before something else, you can even begin to look at something else.
So I think it's fair for you to ask your superintendent to talk about action plan for how she intends to accomplish the goals that she's going to establish tomorrow, but it is not fair to expect your superintendent to accomplish the strategic plan.
Right.
That's something that she and the whole district work on together, including the board. It's another reason why I encourage you as a board to start developing goals for yourself. I'm going to suggest that we table that question until we start looking at the timeline tomorrow.
Okay.
Because I think the timeline will help us, and you will see when I distribute the timeline tomorrow, it's a sample in a watermark on it in big letters, because it's something that we'll work on together and we may tweak. You may want to insert in there a portion that addresses action plan for the superintendent to come back and give you feedback on her efforts to address her goals. There is a place for a mid-year evaluation, or not mid-year evaluation, but a mid-year check on how she's doing. You're really evaluating her on how she's doing addressing her goals. That's really what you're evaluating her on. But we're gonna look at different evaluation tools. So let's table that, and I'm gonna ask you to bring that up again tomorrow.
Okay.
Joanne, you had a question or a comment?
I guess I was in my head thinking, I had the same question as Barb did, and thinking, is this similar to how policy and procedure plays out? So there's policy, but is, are there some action steps towards that? Is there progress towards the goal? But like you said, we should probably table it until there's an outline of time.
And I think that we're going to make good progress the rest of this evening and tomorrow, but there's a watermark on your agenda that says tentative, because I'm guessing we're gonna be left with more questions than answers. Because it's big. One of the things that we're gonna look at tonight are two short, actually, we're gonna look at what the Vermont School Boards Association has to say about superintendent evaluation. And we're also gonna look at an article that I found with Education Week, which is a very well-respected publication that we as educators go to a lot. What we're gonna delve into tomorrow night is a long article, if you will, and I'd almost say it's more like a manual from the Illinois School Boards Association. Steve is familiar with it because we used it through some training that I did with the Hannaford board leadership team and superintendent. I have gone back and researched to see if there's something I like better. I think this is a great tool, and it's not specific to Illinois. And so I think you will, it's too long to get into tonight. We're not even, and I want you to be fresh. But we're gonna do it in pods so that we're not gonna just sit here and all of us read it. We're gonna break it up so that each of you will take a portion, or in small groups you can take a portion. And I really like it because it breaks down superintendent evaluation. I think you'll learn a lot about the process that will help us address the question you raised, the question Joanna was gonna raise, and then we'll kind of go from there. I really think it's it could be published as a manual, I think. I really like it, and I think it helps guide us. Steve, would you concur on that?
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, you presented it and you presented another one with it. And we combined those two models and it was like, wow, this is so much better than anything that we were going to wade through.
Yeah,
So,
and we're gonna look at models of superintendent evaluations and kind of look at those. It's gonna be very important that Wendy be a voice at the table. Talking about team of 14, the 14th needs to have a very important voice in what you end up using for superintendent evaluation. And so there's no way we're gonna get into that tonight because I want everybody to come in fresh tomorrow. Because that's the first thing that we're gonna do tomorrow, is really look at that stuff. Forgive me for calling it stuff, but that's kind of what I'm gonna do tomorrow. Mary Heather?
I just want to go back to Joanna's question about the distinction between board goals for itself in service of the strategic plan versus board setting district goals in service of the strategic plan, and also just making sure that we have an understanding of, okay, so for this year of Dr. Baker's service to us and her goal setting and evaluation, we don't really have the time to sort of rehash and get specific board goals. So it sounds, at least what I'm hearing is that we're kind of working from these goals, these, belonging, access, and success, and we'll kind of tease something out from there. But next year, the expectation would be, if a board is doing its job correctly, that we would come together as a board and establish specific goals for the year that are reflective of these broader umbrella categories, and that the superintendent's goals for that year would have the same DNA as those. Is that making sense? Am I
That is
confusing
making
people?
sense, and I wasn't trying to sidestep your question, Joanna. I think the answer to those questions will come together sort of organically tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't use that term very often, but I think this will all make more sense tomorrow as we go through the exercises. Because let's say, I'm gonna confuse things more.
Okay.
I'm gonna just shut up.
Okay. We'll
Because,
hold till tomorrow.
yeah, I think, but hold the questions
Okay.
and come back to them. I don't want to sidestep your concerns. I think, as you all know, I tend to ramble too much, and I'm afraid if I start trying to answer, I will ramble and make it cloudier. Let's come back to it tomorrow.
That sounds good. I think I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that for me, that I'm understanding that the process that we're doing this year may look a little different than the following year.
Yes.
That we may have more sort of upfront work
Yes.
Right,
before.
right.
Okay, that's all I wanted to.
And I think when we look at the timeline tomorrow, which says sample large in the watermark, I think we may want to build in time when the board starts looking at board goal setting based on what initiatives you have coming up. Like if a board has an anticipated bond issue, then maybe that becomes one of the goals in terms of forming a committee and so we're not gonna have in a board goal something as minute as that, but the goal may be umbrella to address what needs to happen so that we get to the little stuff in the work that happens. And it kind of goes back to the conversation we were having earlier, Steve, I'm pointing to you about, what are the roles that were spelled out on that sheet were more big picture, but yet we know the work has to happen in terms of approving the budget. Why isn't that on there? It's sort of that concept.
I would hope in that process that we're informing each other's goals, there are things operationally that we can't do relative to policy setting that might fill a gap of something we don't have, and we can't move forward to, let's say, achieve, equitable access or achieve equitable success opportunities without those things. So hopefully, if from the operational side, we're providing that feedback based on what we're trying to do, as we're working in this direction, then that informs you, and as you're pulling together what you believe is important relative to direction and what that needs to look like, that informs us in terms of the operational work that we're prioritizing, because we cannot prioritize everything at the same level. That's not going to lead to quality work, nor administrative retention. So, we want to make sure to keep all the talented, smart people that we have. And so being able to work together to establish those priority areas, I think is healthy for the organization as a whole.
All right, so let's move, and hopefully you can see the connection. I've handed you copies of docs that you may have already seen. I can put them up on the smart board, but you already have copies of your board policies A2 and A3. Because those board policies speak to, in very general terms, your responsibility as a board, or rather, what the responsibilities are for the board in terms of superintendent evaluation. And specifically, and it's funny, I highlighted some things in here a couple weeks ago that address some of the stuff we've been talking about tonight. So if you look at board policy A2, it talks about key responsibilities of board members. And it's funny, we were looking at roles a while ago. If you look at those bulleted items, and you can read all this later, but I'm just going to highlight a couple things. The board shall follow all legal and ethical requirements of school governance. The board shall execute fiduciary responsibility, which gets to the conversation about budget. The board shall hire a superintendent, check that off. The board shall be knowledgeable of its role and responsibilities. And the board shall supervise and evaluate the superintendent. So that's another reason we're all here together. And then I just want you to look at, and I'm going to highlight a couple things in that the first couple of sentences in the first paragraph. The board's responsibility is to ensure leadership success without micromanaging. And then the third sentence, it is the responsibility of the superintendent, not members of the board, to direct the administration and coordination of educational programs in the district. In reading the whole policy, those were the things I thought were most important in this particular policy, specific to the things we've talked about tonight. In policy A3, relationship to and roles of the board and the superintendent, there were a lot more things in here that I thought stood out, so I want to highlight them for you. Second paragraph, the whole second paragraph. The board recognizes and values the superintendent's experience and expertise in instructional and administrative matters. The superintendent recognizes and values the board's experience in issues related to the district and board's connections and responsibilities to the community its elected members represent. I know you can read, I'm purposely reading it to you. In the second paragraph, I highlighted the second sentence. The superintendent works only for the board as a whole and not for any individual board member. And then I highlighted the complete fourth paragraph. Annually, the board evaluates the superintendent's performance through the chair of the board. The executive committee of the board is responsible for clearly setting forth and communicating its expectations before evaluation takes place. Would the members of the executive committee please raise your hands? So Mary Heather, Barb, and Suzanne. The superintendent is accountable to the school board for the achievement of the board's goals. So your policy references board's goals. Another reason, even if I hadn't said it, and it fits with effective practice, another reason the board meets their goals. The executive committee of the board will evaluate the superintendent's job performance in a way that is systematic, fair, and effective, and shall share its review with the full board. So what that says is that your executive committee will develop and write the superintendent's evaluation and will share that with the full board. Okay. Tomorrow we'll talk about if there's any other approach that the board may want to charge the executive committee with looking at, but I wanted the whole board to be familiar with what the policy says. Okay, that's it on policy. I just wanted you all to have a copy of it. Okay. Questions on that? Okay, two more things and then we're going to close for the evening. I have searched, and I really have, Vermont Department of Education, Vermont School Board Association, and this is all I've been able to find from Vermont specific to superintendent evaluation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I suppose if you pay for it, you can get more. This, as far as I can tell, is sort of a commercial, if you will, inviting school boards to hire the Vermont School Boards Association to do what I'm attempting to do with you. But that's all I've been able to locate specific to superintendent evaluation from Vermont.
And you are correct in your observation, the VSBA does look to have districts hire it. And so therefore then the evaluation process is different based on who's hiring and what their needs are. So that's why you probably can't find anything else online.
And the Agency of Education is understaffed, overworked, and is handling almost every aspect of education in the state of Vermont. This is very low on their list.
And what I'm giving you now is a very short article from Education Week. I like it. I think it's very forthright. It's from April of 2023. And part of the reason that I opted to give you so much paper is because this training is more of a, it's more of a mini course, if you will, for you as board members on superintendent evaluation. And this is just the first year of doing it, and I thought it might be helpful for you to be able to go back and look at some of this stuff in subsequent years. And so we'll try to have a folder for you tomorrow to put some of this stuff in, and hopefully it won't just be, a folder that collects dust in your file cabinet, but hopefully you will find some of this stuff beneficial. But I'm gonna just let you take a minute and read the article from Ed Week. I do think that it's a very worthwhile overview. And so I'm gonna just be quiet and let everybody. Like I said, it's very short. It's almost like in bullet points. So let me just let you read this article from Education Week from April of 2023. And I think it also gets to some of that goal question that we were talking about. years. I think it was in the high group in school. So what stands out to you from this short article about superintendent evaluation?
It reminded me of what Steve said earlier about asking for information. So once we have a clear idea of what we want to see, then we know when to ask for periodic feedback with specific information.
Clear and objective. I mean, I kept coming through that the goals need to be clear and they need to be objective.
And measurable,
Yes.
SMART goals.
And ongoing.
And few.
And few.
Yeah, few.
Yeah, no, but relative to any kind of evaluation, it would seem like, hearing from years ago, teachers complained because the principal wasn't evaluating a year. And that was this is years ago now, I'm just thinking in terms of the generic term, but that evaluation was so important. Even experienced people who had great confidence in their teaching needed that feedback, maybe just to say, that's really good, you're doing this correct.
Yeah.
And everyone wants that type of feedback. Now, some people in professions only get it through good results, okay? And others need that kind of reinforcement or negative influence. So to me, that's, I don't know how the continuing part was the one, I don't know how you do that all the time except for 1 week a year, but yet it's still really important, I think.
Anything else stood out to you?
I'll just mention, just the frequency of feedback and that, I like at the college, we have quarterly conversations. And what comes to mind is the sort of schedule or timeline for information that would help us be able to provide feedback. And I feel like, we should probably be working directly with Dr. Baker to see okay, so when can we expect some of the data that we would want to use to evaluate and have a sense of when that is dosed throughout the year and take the opportunity to use those times as moments of checking in.
And I suspect Dr. Baker, don't let me put words in your mouth, but I suspect Dr. Baker will want time with you to say, let me tell you about what's going on and the progress I feel like I'm making on this or that goal and work that my team has done that's enabling us to accomplish this. She's going to have a goal, but it's not really a goal that she's going to necessarily be able to accomplish herself. It's a goal that her team and the district works on together. Am I correct on that? So again, you're a team of 14. And so it's not just you asking her to give you time so that she can report back. She's going to want to say, I'm so excited. Let me tell you what happened and the progress that we're making.
I appreciate the framing of it as a conversation instead of as some sort of weird tribunal.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's worked a crappy job where you have that sort of relationship, and this is definitely, this needs to be something where we're all working together to be pulling the rope in the same direction.
Weird tribunal.
Yeah.
Anything else that anyone wants to share? As administrators of the district, anything you want to share before we close?
I just keep reflecting that it really just provides such clarity for staff and parents and for kids who are engaged in this level to be able to understand what this group of committed people are focused on, what the superintendent's focused on, and then how it impacts what we it really feels like a really nicely woven basket that everybody can make sense of together. So I'm feeling really appreciative.
Thank you. Well, I've mentioned some of this to you already, but when we return tomorrow, we've kind of gotten a taste, if you will, as we've moved into superintendent evaluation. And when we return tomorrow, we're going to dive in and really focus on that, what I would like to call that manual from the Illinois School Board Association. I have a little, I think, sort of creative way to get you into groups, and then you'll have work to do in your groups to really process that evaluation. And any administrators who are here will be part of that. And then we're going to share what we learned. And there I am, including the we, but I'll work with you on that. And then we'll go through and you have your agenda in front of you, but just kind of that preview for tomorrow. We're gonna really review that manual. We're gonna hear, after we get through that, and try to educate each other, because it's just too lengthy to ask everybody to sit and read it, besides it's boring as all get out to do that. So you'll help educate each other on what your group discovered, and then we'll get into the goals that Dr. Baker has been thinking about, and kind of a loose action plan for how she thinks she might tackle those goals. It's a discussion. And we'll work together, you'll work together as a team and talk about those things. Then we're going to take a look at some sample evaluation tools, including the one that Addison Central used several years ago. It's extremely well put together. And so that'll be one of 4 tools that you'll look at. Dr. Baker's insights and input are extremely important to deciding what evaluation tool ultimately ends up being the ACSD evaluation tool. I dare say it'll probably end up being some sort of hybrid because there are good things in all of them. But Dr. Baker has seen them. I shared them with her in advance, and she'll have some thoughts for you as to why she may like one more than another. When I worked with another school district a year ago, there were lots, and some of them were just plain junk. And there's no way I was going to bring you what I would consider junk. Quite honestly, of that particular district, the board does not work cohesively like your board does, and that particular district ultimately went with McCrell, which has an outstanding tool, but it's very expensive, and I don't think that you all are in a mode that you necessarily need a McCrell for your evaluation tool. So anyway, we'll work through those and hear Dr. Baker's input and kind of go from there. And then we're going to look at the actual evaluation process, look at the timeline, and I think that's going to fill up our evening tomorrow. So you can count on candy being on the table, get a good night's sleep, and hopefully we'll have a very positive evening. Before we go, comments from anyone? Other thoughts for the good of the group before we conclude? And I do want to point out that we're finishing tonight an hour ahead of schedule. Just want to put that. But any comments for the good of the group before we finish?
I thank you very much for our, considering that Steve and I were in another meeting that ran an hour and a half.
I have a question. Do we know if the setup's gonna stay? Like, could we leave our paperwork and things here for tomorrow, or should we take
I
it?
would probably think it would.
I would take
I
it
would
just
take it.
because I don't know what this room might be scheduled for, other activities tomorrow.
During the day, unfortunately.
Wendy, are there paper clips up here that we can help ourselves to, that maybe everybody can at least clip their stuff?
I split everything inside of my.
I think so.
It's on the other side of that. I think there might be paper clips in there too.
Hey, Barb, for her comment, I think the format, if we're going to use this room for our board meetings, I know this is a little different because we have a facilitator, but we need to be more in a circle rather than right angles, because I can't hear Suzanne